Welcome everybody to Mr. Goldman's Art Room. Welcome everybody to Mr. Goldman's Art Room. Okay, so today what we are going to do is we're going to do a watercolor. And as I said, I consider watercolor to be pretty easy. So we're going to start out with a wide brush. A wide square brush like this is ideal. And what we're going to do first is we're going to soak the paper. Now I like to speed up the process a little bit. And so I'm just going to spread that water all over. Now keep in mind what I'm doing is called a wash. This is a wash. So we're only going to go, let's see, that's far enough. There's going to be a sky. Okay, and I think we're going to do a sunset. So these are the colors that I'm using. And I'm going to take red and yellow mostly. I might throw a little purple in. Now one very important thing about doing a watercolor wash is this. Lay your brush down. Be very, very gentle. If you take your brush and you go straight down like this and you bang the paper, the pigments will get ingrained into the watercolor paper. You have to keep in mind that watercolor, put some red on it now, that was orange what I just put on it. Watercolor paper has grain. Like if you were a little ant walking on this watercolor paper, it would look like a mountain range to you. Because it's very tiny little bumps that create the grain, and color can get trapped in that grain, and that's sort of what you want to avoid. So I gently put it on. Now I want to do this fairly quickly, so you want to do this at a time where you're not going to get distracted or the phone rings or something else that's going to consume your time. And put the colors on strong, like I really dig in to the paint to really get that watercolor on there. And I'll get maybe a little more red. Now, the best watercolors in the world, the best watercolor washes that artists do all over the world are done best by letting the water do the work. So you don't want it to look like brush strokes did it. You want to move it around. Always have some tissues on hand. I have a little bit of tissue right here. Why do I need tissue? You're about to see. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just pull a little off the edge so you don't have too much there. Sometimes you can end up with a little too much water. Now, as long as you continue to keep it wet, you can keep working it. Now, there is a certain point where I would consider it to be overworking it. You don't want to overwork a piece. Okay, so there is a point you'll just have to be sensitive to your own intuition where you'll come to a point where you just like it. It looks really good. Other times, like I'll say here in this corner, I would love to see a little more red, or yellow rather. So I'll put a little more yellow. Just kind of move that around. I don't want everything to blend together. I want some differentiation here. And that's a wash. And then one more time I'll do this, where I'm just going along the edge to pull off the extra water. Now you don't want to do that too much. If you do it too much, you'll have no color left on your paper. And then I'm just going to take the rest of this tissue, wipe the table, and then lay it down. And that's my sky wash. That is the sky that we're going to be creating today. So now, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back to you. I'm just going to move it around a drop more. So I see that I have a little bit of water right over here that needs to sort of find its way. Maybe one more quick little wipe on the edge. Otherwise that can create marks, like the extra water will create like little marks. We don't want that. All right, almost there. And that is a really nice wash. That is our sky background. So we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to come back when it's completely dry and show you step 2. I did the bottom, and we're going to take a few minutes and I'm going to teach you guys how to do trees. So you need 2 things. Any kind of pointy brush will do, but I buy these brushes called liner brushes. They're not super expensive. I get them on Amazon. They're long and thin. As you can see, it's almost a 1/2 inch. Here, I'll put a ruler up to it and we'll kind of measure. Yep, it's about a 1/2 inch. So what I'm looking to do is to get you to use a liner brush to do trees. Now you can do this with pretty much any pointy brush. I mean, it doesn't have to be a liner brush. If you don't happen to have one on hand, that's fine. But watch how I do a tree. So I'm getting a lot of paint on my brush, and I'll move the paint closer so that you can see that. Okay, and then watch how I do a tree. I start at the bottom, and I go straight up with a line. Now the line doesn't have to be perfectly straight, not at all. Okay, and then what I do is I do 3 branches coming out like that, and each time I load my brush up with a little more paint. And those are my 3 branches. You could do as many as 4 because I kind of made a tall tree. There we go. Now you don't want all your branches looking the same. You'll see some are weavy, some are straight, totally up to you. Now I'm going to just take a little of that paint off. I want just a small amount now. And you flick your brush. You go out like this. So this is step 2. Step 2 is learning how to do a tree. And you always make branches face up. It's not that some tree branches don't face down, but generally speaking, it looks a lot more natural. So as you can see, there's thousands of branches on a tree, so don't worry about doing too many, that's for sure. Okay, and then every once in a while, you're going to need to load your brush again. Always make sure that the branches coming off are thinner than the branch they're attached to. Now sometimes, like, see how thin this one is? I'll thicken that just a little bit. Okay, and you never want a branch to go from thin to thick and back thin again. Branches always go thick to thin. So I'm going to make this slightly thicker too because it came out a little too thin. That just adds a little more realism to the thing. I often also will thicken the bottom of the tree a little bit. So it's a good firm foundation. And now we'll go back to branches and just continue to do this. And I try not to do branches on the exact same side. So in other words, see this branch, let's take here, I wouldn't do one on the other side. I go up a little or I go down a little. For some reason it does make it a lot more natural. And in real trees, you rarely ever see a branch on the exact opposite side. So we'll continue with a couple more of these branches. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. I like to do a lot of really tiny branches because I think it gives the tree a little more realisticness. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to use something called a natural sponge. Why is it called a natural sponge? Well, it's not like the sponges that you wash your dishes with. This is the type of sponge that they find on the bottom of the ocean. And they work best, the natural sponges. It's not that you couldn't use a sponge like from under your sink. That's quite possible. You could probably pull that off, but it doesn't work quite as well. So I dip it in water. I'm going to move my water down so you can see better. So I dip it in water. I squeeze all my water out. Okay. See, can you see? Yeah, you can see the water. Okay. And then I'm rubbing into my color. Now you want a lot of paint on this sponge. And then what I do is I just go like this. It makes it look like thousands of branches. I'm using a light green and I'm using a dark green. And this is easier than, say, taking a tiny brush and drawing each one of these leaves one at a time. And that's how you do a tree. And then, of course, I'm just going to take 2 minutes. I'm going to rub into my dark green here and show you how to do grass, because we're going to be doing grass as well. And that's the practice I want you to do as part 2 in this painting process. It's very easily, my suggestion to you is that you do 2, maybe 3, even 4 trees. Now you don't have to use really good watercolor paper. You can buy cheap watercolor paper for your practices. Sometimes I just cut off pieces to use as scraps, like I did in this case. Part of it in green, the part that's going to be all grass. And what I did was I left a white space. So keep an eye out. I'm about to show you what the next step is. So I'm going to take some orange, maybe a little red. I'm going to keep my brush very, very wet as I do this. And what I want to do is I want to just run a very thin layer. I might even, there's a lot of yellow in that sky, and this is what's called reflective color. So you got to keep your brush moving when you do this, because you don't want those lines, you don't want to create marks in the paper. You want to keep it very wet. In fact, add a little extra water if it starts drying out. This is one thing that you have to do fairly quickly. Okay, I leave a little white in the back because whenever water hits land, it creates a little bit of foam. So I find that by doing just a little bit of white in the background, it gives it a little added realness or reality. Now, one of the things I would do if I didn't do that is I would take just a tiny brush with some white acrylics and do that foam. Then we're going to add just a touch more red over here. We're not looking to be really strong with our colors. We're looking to be like just really gentle with them. So watch how I do this. I'm just kind of blending it out. There we go. I'm going to add a little more color on to both this side. Yeah, there we go. And we got some color going. Okay, and then I'm going to add just a little more red. No, I don't think that's going to work. Let's try this. Maybe turn it this way. Here we go. Stop it. Discard. Alright, so you can all see me, which is cool. This is a good thing. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to just blend a little more here, very gently. I want that red to be a little bit stronger than it currently is. This is going to be our little pond that we're creating. I want it to have sort of a feeling of reflections in it. I'm going to add just a little bit of red over in the left-hand corner. Not too hard, not too difficult to do. Okay, and that's our pond. So for the next step, we're going to take, again, that long liner brush that I was talking to you about, and I'm going to wet it, and I'm going to take some dark green from my palette, my watercolor palette. So you can probably see in the film right here. And I'm going to do grass around the pond. Now the grass at the back of the pond generally is going to be smaller to create the illusion that it's further away. Now when I do grass, I'm really sort of careful to be very random. Like you don't want to look like a comb combed it all straight. Nature is extremely random. I often find it looks more natural as well if you go from, so watch, if you go from large to small and gradually get really tiny with some of that. I'm going to have the grass on the back. We're going to throw just a little bit on the side, like this. Like I said, it just, grass grows very randomly. And we'll be a little taller here because it's in the front and it's closer to us. And it'll be very random. Be careful when you do this that the pond's dry. I mean, it's pretty dry, so I think I'm okay, even though I just did it a few minutes ago. But you might want to check that first. Just make sure your pond is dry. It's a little wet in that corner, so I'm going to hold off a little over there. Remember, some of them are going to be large, some of them are going to be small. You want to be careful not to repeat. In other words, and I'm going to just close up this camera a little so that you can see it. There we go. And you want to be careful not to repeat your pattern as you do grass. You want it to be very, very random. So I think now that I got a little closer to you, you can see it a little better. Okay, so here we go. Now, I'm trying 2 cameras for the first time. I'm curious whether that will be helpful for you. So I thought I'd give that a try. A little more grass is going to be very small, so I'm going to less water on my brush. Have it come out this way. And it just flicks. You can I in fact suggest that if you've never done this before, that you practice grass on just scrap paper. Now, you can also have grass coming out of the actual pond because that's not unusual. I grew up next to a bay in Long Beach, New York, and you always saw like sort of grass growing out of the water. So that's not an unusual thing like that. Just lots of little random strokes. Now at the very beginning of the picture, like at the very bottom of the picture, and let me adjust the camera so that you can see the bottom of the picture. Hold on. There we go. We'll just adjust it a little. There we go. So what you want to do at the very bottom is make your grass large, because making the grass large at the bottom helps create that illusion of space, of it being, you're closer to this, a little further away from this, and really far away from the grass on the other side.